supporters as the front runners in elections, in which most of the time they don't even front load. And what do I mean? The people that should be frontliners in election are people with ideas, like people who can actually climb the stairwell to this floor. Yeah.
Shots fired.
Yes.
Okay. I feel that.
Yeah. So if they don't have this capability, they don't represent this capacity, you don't call them frontliners. It's just like you set an exam for people in an examination season, and you say the guys who sit in the front of the class are the best, even though they did not pass the exams. Does it make sense? No.
Okay.
So, in this case, it's just the media that's pushing these characters as frontliners, and we disagree fundamentally with that.
But if we look at the results, for instance, of that one, of the one in 2019, you scored, like we said.
I disagree with those figures. Those are figures that were allocated to candidates. We've said enough of that.
A couple of days ago, I was looking through the papers. You also talked about INEC. And you said that, hey, having to do with INEC, you seem not to have so much trust.
Exactly, because I'm coming.
Then why are you putting yourself forward?
Well,
you feel INEC will not be able to deliver.
So every time there's an election, it is just beyond the figures. It's about issues, it's about ideas.
Okay.
And it's also, for us, those of us who are in revolutionary politicking, is an opportunity to throw out to the people the contradiction in the system. Are you getting my point? Okay. So if we are predicting to you that INEC is going to rig the election, and you don't pay attention to it, it may not be me that will get rigged out, it might be your favorite candidate. And then you remember me. So it's our country, it's our nation. We have a duty to project what is expected of the country. And INEC owes a duty to organize free and fair elections. If they don't, they have failed in their duties to do so. And then they're telling the citizens, that they have other reasons to do other things. In this case, probably the destination at the end of the day is that everybody gets tired of being just being jacked around by INEC and the owners of Nigeria, and they will take other means available to them. And we're not ruling this out. We've said that many times, that elections by themselves may not be the final solutions if people organize elections don't carry out credible elections.
Now, before I let my colleague ask you specific questions as to your plans, one more question around this. Still talking about, front runners and the likes. Some of the things people have said is about, at least some of the candidates, is about their track records. You talk about Tinubu, for instance, they will say, he built the modern Lagos. You go to Obi, for instance, Obi will talk about what he did while he was governor. And then you also have Atiku. Atiku will talk about when he was vice president, he oversaw this, he oversaw that. Even though I saw a tweet from Obi Ezekwesili saying that there was something that they claimed on Twitter that Atiku did that is not quite factual, but that's on another hand. But these people are talking about their track records in public office. Don't you think this, in terms of the offices they held, this gives them some strength to be able to actually, stand as president in your own regard? Don't you think this weighs against you?
No, not at all. Okay. As a matter of fact, I have better track records than all of them combined, because we are now in the age of democracy, right? How do you think Nigeria became a democratic nation? It was our own track records, and that's far bigger than...
Can you be clear on that?
Well, when I was a young person in this country, when I was in my 20s, I joined hands, risking our lives. We put our lives on the line to bring about democratic rule in Nigeria.
Also makes this claim.
Well, he does make the claim, but he didn't do as much as I did, because why? When the chips were down, he ran away to the U.S. Instead, we were on ground here. Atiku was also supposed to fight for democracy after the 1992 primaries of the Social Democratic Party. As soon as he lost, he disappeared. Peter Obi never even participated at all. There's no record of him raising a finger to fight for democracy in this country. So had I not done that, had some of the young people who were at the University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and all the universities across this country where young people took up the fight for democracy and drove the military out of power, there wouldn't be elections, there wouldn't be political parties today. So we are the forerunners, we are the front runners in creating the path towards democracy. And every other thing I've done ever since then pointed to the fact that I have been consistent in building and strengthening the culture of democracy in the country. And I've never gotten paid for it. I've never been in public office because I decided to be in the office of the citizen, which is the most important office in the land. And when you talk about track records, the Lagos is talking about, is that a modern place for you? That is the biggest ghetto in the world, Lagos.
In your opinion?
That's the truth.
I mean,
or you can
favelas in Brazil. What about that?
Favelas are different from a modern city.
You say the biggest ghetto.
No, yes.
Yeah, we're talking about ghettos now.
You can have ghettos on the outskirts of a city or as part of a city. But to have an entire city be referred to as a ghetto, that's what Lagos is. Yes. Yes. There's a deodorized part of it and there's a ghettoized part of it. But still, Lagos is a ghetto. And nobody who had worked in that Lagos should say it publicly. The same thing applies to Atiku. They were the ones who started this kind of protracted ASU strikes that you're saying. Because instead of resolving the problem during their time, they went and bought themselves private universities. Obi's own case is even worse. I've never seen anything in Anambra State that he built that lasted more than 4 years. He built the worst roads, never built an hospital he could have go to, never built a school.
So what have you built?
Well, I've built democracy.
Let's talk talking about track records.
Yes.
I mean, I can't talk about Omoyele Sowore without talking about the revolutionary movement.
Yes.
I mean, what revolution are you aiming at in Nigeria 2020?
There's no two revolutions, I'm not trying to build a Toyota truck called revolution. It is a revolution that will bring about total change, that will change the course of history, that will make life great for people in this country, that will make everything that ought to go to the people get to them, not a system that just changes them from time to time. That's the revolution I want. The revolution that doesn't allow 5 people to be richer than 200 million people. That's what the revolution I'm talking about. The revolution that ascribes to people the kind of dignity that they deserve as a people. And ultimately, my revolution is for the continent of Africa, where the African man, the black man, will become proud, owning and processing his own resources and don't have to be rich and poor at the same time. How do you have the best resources in the world and you are the poorest at the same time? How do you live in a world where your oil is selling very well, but you also have 133 million people in poverty? They call it multi-dimensional poverty. When they refer to poverty in Nigeria, they call it multi-dimensional. And I ask myself, how do you have multi-dimensional wealth and multi-dimensional poverty at the same time?
I want to build on poverty, like you just mentioned now. We saw in the papers, 25 million Nigerians may suffer, hunger come 2023.
Are they not suffering it now?
How are we going to change that?
Exactly. So you can't change that objective condition by voting for the people who invented hunger. All these so-called politicians you are saying have experience and track record. That is their track record.
Fine words from you, just like it's coming from some other candidates.
Yeah.
But the question is, how would you achieve these things that you have in mind, this revolution?
Yes, we've stated it clearly, that revolution will happen because people will be mobilized to the barricades. And now, after 2019 election, in which over 26 cities across the country participated in a protest that said we have had enough. And when that protest was suppressed after my arrest, what did you think happened next? NSAS, all right? So, because sometimes when you talk about revolution, people think that revolutions happen overnight. They don't happen overnight. The French Revolution started 10 years before it finally hit, in 1789. And it's same, these things will keep pushing until one day there will be an end to all the shenanigans when people say enough is enough and we can't continue like this anymore. You push people to the wall, you'll get to the point where they no longer dig the wall with their nails. They'll fight back and the table will turn.
You still not answered my question.
What's the question?
In terms of, if you emerge as president,
yes,
what would you do to ensure this thing get achieved, this revolution? Are you saying you're going to lead people to protest in Nigeria when you are president?
No, no. There are ways through which a revolution can happen. It can happen by the ballot, and people can also put their feet on the ground if they don't get what they deserve. So in terms of, you're asking about our programs, when I become president, and I said I've divided it into two, that there will be institutional reforms, solid or revolutionary institutional reforms, in which we'll deal with the issue of security, power sector, employment, great things that we laid out in what we call Spicer hits, including technology, sustainability, our ability to feed ourselves, so that 25 million people don't die of hunger this year, according to the records. And then there are foundational issues. Now, what are foundational issues? The restructuring that you've been talking about, changing the Nigerian constitution, ensuring that Nigerians define the paths of unity, nationhood, and progress, peace and prosperity for themselves in a document known as the Constitution. And then the rest, of course, between these two, will bring about the just, fair distribution of resources, because at the end of the day, we are talking about the well-being of the Nigerian person. You know, an average young person can go to school without having their universities closed down for 9 months, and when they get out of university, they can find a job. We can provide cheap and affordable housing for people to own, and we can provide infrastructure for people so that they can get to their destination, and they can also participate in the economic life of the country without having to work for somebody. You know, it creates opportunity for entrepreneurs, as you like to call them. But for me, we call them participation in the economic life of the country. Because the moment you start going in the direction of entrepreneurship, I feel like you're going esoteric. It's like you're talking about special brand of people. Because I've been an entrepreneur myself. I built a global brand, you know, known as Sahara Reporters. And I know how it came about. You know, it was possible because it was a country that provide an enabling environment for me to do that, including in some cases subsidizing rent. You know, as a company that just started when I started in 2006. But I was a society that promotes those kind of endeavors. When you get here, the moment you bring a good idea to bear on the populace, somebody come and destroy it. You have no protections. You have nothing. So what I'm trying to say to you is that those are revolutionary endeavors that will happen, ideas, and these have been documented. You can find them on our website, Sowore.org, and our party's website, aacparty.org. So many of these ideas have been around since 2018 when we started our political party. And don't forget, our political party is the first political party in Nigeria in recent times. This dispensation that was created by young people, and fresh ideas, young ideas are the only prevailing things that we don't have, like big men controlling, no godfathers, no godsons or godmothers. It's just ideas. And these ideas are what we have said, and we've asked that Nigerians allow us to bring to bear on the country, so that this country can experience the revolution we're talking about. And then you would understand what it means to be a revolution, where you live under a government revolutionary.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Even then, while you're still explaining, it's bringing up more questions for me.
Absolutely.
More questions than answers.
Is it not beautiful that you can talk to a presidential candidate?
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're still talking to the presidential candidate.
That I think is revolutionary by itself.
Yeah, African
because
Congress.
You can't find your front runners in the studio.
Which of the parties?
Of any of the parties.
Some of them presidential.
Not APC,
absolutely.
not PDP, not even Labour Party has been to your studio.
For now.
Well, how many? Yeah, I'm not even pushing privilege. I'm just saying that it's not just about privileges alone. It's about the ability to interact and engage with the populace. Just that I'm talking to you, I'm learning a lot from you.
So you've given us a lot of ideas.
Fantastic.
What you intend to achieve. You have not told us the steps to achieve it. But let's narrow it down. You can't talk about everything.
Yeah, because there's never enough time.
Let's talk about it. You talked about how your party involves more youths. So now you have youths founding this party. So many young men with you here, which is a beautiful thing to see. But then, what is your plan for the youths? I mean, so much for the youths. You talk about the Jaguar syndrome right now. Everybody wants to leave.
Yeah.
The middle class is shrinking.
There's practically no middle class left.
Maybe there's no. Some are saying there's no middle class anymore.
None.
What's the plan for this? Let's look at ASU, for instance. Let's just stick with the constituency of Lagos. Let's look at ASU, for instance. What's that specific plan? You can say, hey, there will be the strikes. There will no more strikes. That's one thing to say. But you have steps, practical steps that we will listen to and say, hey, this is revolution.
So when you talk about youths, what you do for young people in particular is to give them an opportunity to achieve their potentials to the fullest. And their potentials are not only limited to education. People will say, well, if you send them to school, yes, I'm sending them to school. I'm putting 20 million kids out of putting them from the streets and putting them in classrooms. I'm offering young people free education. Yeah, including
free
those,
education?
yes, up to university level, including paying university students.
Even though Nigeria is broke.
Nigeria is not broke. Don't repeat that publicly.
We are not broke.
We are not broke. The problem is that resources are in the hands of wrong people, if you have them. Yes, Nigeria is not broke. If Nigeria were to be broke, where would the Akatan General find 150 billion naira to steal? You ask yourself that. Where do these snakes and monkeys get money to swallow?
Would you be slashing your salary just even start?
No, the salary. I wouldn't even pay myself a salary. Why would you want to pay yourself a salary that you won't touch or you won't need to touch? There's nothing there. The salaries that even if I don't pay myself, it's still not a problem. That's symbolic. That's symbolic. You should talk about how you pay workers very well. For instance, we have plans to pay a living wage. And our calculation at this point, based on the cost of living, is 250,000 naira per month.
Really?
Yes, that is our proposal of a minimum. There's a difference between a minimum wage and a living wage. Yes, minimum wage is a legal wage that you cannot pay below yourself. That can transport you to work and back if you're working. That can pay your rent, pay your electricity bills, and other bills, pay for education for your children. That's the living wage, And in a country, before you argue with me, where would you find the money from?
That's not the argument.
Yes, but we are lucky enough to be able to make comparable conversations around it. That we have people who earn maximum wage, and what is maximum wage? Is this infinitely elastic wage? Like people like senators go like to Nigeria. Do you know how much a senator takes home a month? 15 million naira.
Let's get back.
Let's get back to you. We're speaking about education. You're talking about free education.
Yes.
I know you were going to be given a certain amount to university.
No, yes, university students will be entitled to 100,000 naira per semester under my government.
All universities.
Oh yes, there are 1.7 million university students in Nigeria. Yes, I've done my homework.
Okay.
Yeah, I come to the conclusion that 100,000 is not a bad grant for them because that's about $120.
In terms of improving education,
yes.
We talk about the salary.
That's after we have invested in infrastructure, the education infrastructure, pay lecturers very well. You can imagine if the minimum wage is 250,000, then lecturers will be earning decent wages, and there won't be need for them to be going on strike constantly over wage and salary issue or remuneration. That will be solved. But the other things they're asking for is investment in education. Your labs, your laboratory, your laboratories, your libraries, buildings, classrooms. I'm going to break it down to classroom sizes. In my time, no classroom in a university should have more than 25 students per classroom. Yes. That's how I have broken this down to, and this is because I was a lecturer for 10 years in a U.S. university in New York City, 2 universities in New York, and the largest class was 27 students. The other class, which is private university, I can't have more than 14 students in my classroom because beyond that number, it's believed that you're just teaching air. People don't assimilate. They can't connect. The the classroom is large. But here at the University of Ibadan, I use that as an example. If you go to their classroom, people are they're sitting on the floor. There are people at the back. They have one miserable loudspeaker. The people at the back can't hear. They can't concentrate. There's one lecturer who is just trying to teach people who are, that's not the learning environment. I want to create a learning environment, and we'll make the investment. The reason is because of what you said, the Jaguar syndrome. People want to leave because they find anywhere else better than Nigeria, and you realize that the moment people leave this country, the second week they'll send you a message that they are doing well. You understand? But I've done Jaguar before. I spent 20 years in America, and I can tell you that it is better here if it is well governed than some of those countries where people are running to. They will become miserable after a while. You know, after you're done settling down, you discover that, you know, the grass only look greener on the other side, but it dries during the winter.
Actually, still talking about steps. You were talking about this in Kano, how you were going to be building a railway, a fast railway from Lagos to Kano.
Yes.
I remember. And you spoke about how redesigning the naira was going to worsen the economy.
And they did.
So how can you
first, the naira was never redesigned. You know, what they did was they took the naira to Snapchat, you know, and they had a filter and they poured dye on it. And I was right about it, because now you can't go to a party with the naira in your white shirt, you know. It will stain your pocket. But most importantly, a few weeks after the naira was redesigned, the central bank governor was accused of terrorism. There's nowhere in the world where the central bank governor, the chief monetary policy officer of the country, is accused of terrorism. He just came back yesterday. The country is in a mess. So how do you want me to do it? I mean, how is it best to describe going from here to Kano? Right now, if you're driving to Kano, you know, it takes you almost 18 hours or 20 hours. A fast-moving train at 130 kilometers per hour or 150, like they have in Germany, they have in Japan, they have in China, will take you to Kano in 6 hours. You know, that means if you are bringing tomatoes, fresh tomatoes from Kano to Lagos, you arrive by 12 noon if you leave at 6 a.m. Wouldn't that be a beautiful country to live in? And if you have that, why would you want to go and live elsewhere?
Fine ideas.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure talking to the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. But before we let you go, if you can just summarize within a few words, what would you do different if you become president? And how soon will Nigerians feel your impact as president if you get there?
So let me take electricity as one of the examples of where you can feel the impact. That within my first 2 years in office, I'll be pushing towards 10,000 additional megawatts of electricity, and that you'll feel the impact in terms of industrial growth. I'm going to ensure that by the 4th year, I have done 20,000 megawatts of electricity, in addition to the 7,000 miserable one you have now. So with 27,000 megawatts, and that would take electricity, permanent electricity, to about 500 to 2 million homes in Nigeria. And you can start to understand what I mean. I'm not talking about electricity that comes and goes, not the epileptic type. And the question, of course, you have, how do you do it? You know, we're going to bring an energy mix on it. Because part of our problem is that we're all relying on hydroelectricity and gas-powered plants now. You know, but you have the opportunity with technology to do solar. You have waves, you have winds, and several other cheap sources of energy. So we are also going to include this in our energy transition. Like I like to say, in 10 years after I become president of Nigeria, you will no longer we will introduce drone taxis.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
I mean, I was thinking